Hey guys, welcome back to Break Stand Garage. Today I'll be working on the C4 Corvette LS swap, and also telling you a little story. So I have another little block right there, rotating assembly. It's actually a 4th gen. Trying to figure out what I do with that. But let's go back to last Thursday. I was pretty excited because the last few days prior to Thursday, I was tuning the Corvette, taking it for rips up and down the road. Everything was good. I got my air fuel ratio dialed in within like 4%, but that's up to like about half throttle. I haven't done any like wide open rips at this point. Oil pressure was holding pretty steady. It was like 50 psi, really cold, and then once it warmed up, I was seeing like 30, 35. Yeah, everything was looking pretty good, but I never ran the car more than like 3 miles at a time. I just let it idle, get up to temperature, and then I took her for a quick rip, and I did a little tuning and whatnot once the coolant was up to temperature. So come Thursday morning, I'm like, I'm going to take this thing to work. It's going to be great. I'll show people what I've been doing for the last like 6 months. But that's kind of where my problem started last week. But I was on my way to work, and I was just cruising along, and I turned on the vitals screen because I planned on doing a couple little rips on the highway, so I keep a close eye on my air fuel ratios. And about 3 miles up the highway, I was just cruising like 2,000 RPM, and I was going through Bangor, Maine, and all of a sudden I noticed like what I thought was a little bit of noise, but this ZF6 transmission is pretty loud. It's a black tag, so it's the more noisy transmission. So I'm sitting there like, something doesn't seem right. It's just a little different noise than I used to hearing from the engine, but also I haven't driven this on the highway. So I was like, I'll double check my vitals. So I looked, everything looked good, went to my other screen and saw that my oil pressure was at 0. It was at -2. So that's probably a calibration thing, but it was virtually at 0. And slight panic set in. I pulled over off the side of the highway, looked at it, everything seemed pretty good. I was running at like 165 degrees. I don't have an oil temp, but the oil temp was probably really hot at this point. I'm not positive, but the oil was probably pretty warm because I took off valve cover and it was steaming a little bit, but not too bad. Oil was still full, and the oil looked pretty clean. I was on the side of the highway. It was like 15 degrees out, so I didn't spend too much time looking into it. But I fired it back up, and I noticed that like I didn't hear any noises out of the ordinary. I thought maybe it was injectors. Like I heard a little ticking. Like to me it didn't sound like lifters, but obviously it was lifters. So I'm like, we'll see. I mean, I doubt I have 0 oil pressure. Like I've never dealt with a clogged oil filter or anything like that, so I didn't realize it would just kind of and actually go to 0. So that was bad news. So I fired it back up, got on the highway, started taking off. Didn't hear any knocking or anything. The noise from the transmission I could hear, and I didn't really hear anything other than that because it is pretty loud. I don't have the interior completely together, so I get a lot of road noise. Needless to say, I got off the highway, started taking off, and it kind of stumbled a bit. And that's when I instantly knew, like, there's got to be something wrong, 100%. So I put on my directional, pulled off to the side, and then I could hear some lifter rattling. And I'm like, shut it off, got under the hood. Oil still looked pretty good. It was full. I probably had 6 miles on this oil change, so I wasn't too worried about it. I was at this point, but I pulled off to the side, heard some rattling, shut it off, got under the hood, took a valve cover off, and my idea was I was going to fire it up for a second, see if I could see any oil coming out of the lifters. That's the second issue, the second thing I did wrong. First was when I pulled over on the highway, I probably should have just shut it off and had it towed home, but I was in denial, and I just blamed it on the sensor, because the sensor I did get from the junkyard, and it was plugged full of stuff, and I just sprayed it out with some carb cleaner. So I figured that was it. Second mistake was trying to fire it back up after I pulled off the side of the highway. When I turned the key, I just heard like a squeak, and then nothing. And at that point, I believe my 7 and 8 rod bearings, that's where they actually spun. But anyways, I had it towed home, got it home. It sat for about an hour between me shutting it off and getting it towed home, and I cranked it over real quick just to see if she's still locked up, and it spun. It started right up. I didn't hear anything bad for like 2 seconds that it ran. I didn't hear any knocking. So I was like, all right, well, after work, I'll look at it. So later that day came, after work, I drained the oil, checked the filter. Sure enough, I kicked the filter apart, and there's a lot of black sludge, like black stuff, completely clogged the filter. So that's when I kind of realized I messed up. I cleaned the block myself, but I didn't have it hot tanked. I didn't have the crankshaft hot tank stuff, so I'm assuming that there was some stuff still in the engine that I worked loose, and got on the highway, and it just kind of broke free and clogged the oil filter. But live and learn. I actually once I did that, I zipped a new filter back in there, put some fresh oil in, let it run for like 10 minutes, shut it off, drain the oil, change the filter. I did that a few times, kind of thinking, yeah, the tolerances are probably a little larger than they were, an hour prior. But I figured I'll run some thick oil. Maybe I'll get by, and I'll get a different engine and run it till it, finally calls it quits. And by that time, I'll have this other engine running, or at least ready to go in. But this was my third mistake. I should have just tore it apart there and checked all the bearings and stuff, but I didn't. I just, it's a junkyard motor. It cost me like $400. So I, after the third oil change, I decided to go for a rip. Went down the road, did a few pulls. Once I got it all up to temp and the oil pressure was still holding at 35 PSI. So I did like 3 10-pound pulls, which was a lot of fun. The thing went like a bat out of hell. I can't wait to get this other motor in it or fix this one, and do it all over again. Just hopefully I'll keep a closer eye on my oil pressure. I did a couple 10-pound rips, and she went really good. Like, not a hiccup. It went awesome. And then on the way back, I was heading back, past the driveway. I was going to go to the other way and just kind of, let it cool down on a short little cruise. And it started backfiring out the exhaust. I was like, that's weird. So I thought that I burned up like a valve or something, or maybe I might have messed up something in the lower end, and I was getting oil in the cylinder and might have burned up the valve or whatever can happen. So I pulled in the driveway, in my driveway, and that's when I noticed the oil pressure was down to like 6 to 8 PSI. So it dropped significantly. I pulled in the garage, drained the oil. It didn't look that bad. So I swapped out the oil in the filter again, fired it up, and I heard some rod knock. So the rod knock went away as soon as I started building oil pressure, but at this point I know the engine's screwed. So I got back, I pulled it apart. With it in the car, I just had to lift the motor out of the mounts. I was able to get the F-body pan off of the LS motor. I wiggled the rod caps to find the 2 loose ones, and they were number 7 and 8. So I'm just about to start unbolting the transmission. Once I do that, everything's disconnected and ready to come out. I can take the manifolds off. Actually, I'll leave the manifolds on. I'll take the accessories off at least, maybe the manifolds. But I'll take the accessories off, flip this thing around, take the front and rear cover off, take the mains off and the rod caps off. I'll pull the crankshaft out, and hopefully there's no more damage to like the rods or anything. I actually checked the rods. I'll show you the rod caps. I'll show you the worst, the one that got it the worst, number 8. So here is number 8. So to me, I don't see any discoloration, but I'll compare it to the other ones just to make sure. But I don't see any discoloration where it got like extremely hot. It kind of looks a little bluish on the screen, but it actually isn't. So I am really hoping, that I can save the rods. It'll just save me from pulling the heads and stuff. But if I can pull the crankshaft out, get the crankshaft swapped over, get some new bearings in there, then this little baby over here, I'm hoping to get this thing ready for some boost as well. It's an aluminum block. While I'm building this, I'll be playing around with the iron block, giving her some boost. It's just, I'm gonna have it up and running a lot faster. I'll have it up and running a lot faster if I just replace the crank in this one than if I pull everything off of that, swap it out onto this motor, while also gapping the rings. Gapping the rings is something I really want to do, and when I gap the rings and I put them back in, there's a chance I might crack a ring or something or break one, which would really suck, just because I haven't done it a lot at all. So instead of being out a couple, 2-3 weeks trying to get this block running and installed, I'm just going to swap out the crank on the iron block, get that back up and running. I gotta inspect the pump. If the pump's scored up, I'll have to get a new pump, oil pump. But right now, I think I'm only maybe 2 days away from getting this thing back up and running. So it's been a couple days. That's where we're leaving off with this. I have done a rough hone of the cylinders. As you can see, it's not really a hone, actually, it's just a deglaze. And I was going to reuse the piston rings after gapping them, which was pretty easy because most of them are already gapped out to 28 to 30 thou anyways. So there's probably goes to show that there's a lot of wear in those rings. I started cleaning the pistons, and I actually cleaned up all these rings, got all the oil and the crustaceans out of the oil ring and stuff. So there's still some built up in the ring grooves, and I'm actually gonna I've been watching like a few videos anyways of different ways to clean those out, and the best way is to get some chem dip or something similar and do like a little soak, and I guess it loosens it right up. So I'm going to be doing that after deglazing these cylinders. It's Baton Motorsports. He offered for me to use his dyno to properly seat these rings. So instead of putting the old ones back, I was thinking it'd be really stupid to do that. So I'm going to order some new rings. These GM ones, they're not actually that cheap. They're like 130 bucks through AutoZone, but I'll probably just order them on Amazon. You can get them for like 54 bucks. And I'll do a proper break-in with the rings. And then I'll probably reuse most of my, like all the lifters and stuff. I gotta pull apart the oil pump, see what kind of condition that's in, if there's any scoring or anything. I might try and reuse this oil pump, which is from the LC9 Gen 4. So I'd use that oil pump if I can. Between both of these, I have to at least have a good one. It's the law. So yeah, I snagged these heads from a buddy of mine up the road. Got a good deal on these. Wicked nice guy. I'm sure I'll be reaching out to him in the future. But I have a set of, I think these are 862s. Yep, 862s. They're pretty good shape. Somebody recently sprayed them. I guess they were going to use them, but never ended up doing it. These ones, I think the valve covers he said he got from a junkyard a while ago, which is why they have a tag on them. And then over here, I have a set of 317s. See if I can find the mark on those. Don't know if you can see it, but 317s, they're a little dirtier. They haven't been cleaned up or anything. But that's just to have options in the future. I am going to run the 706s on the aluminum block. And once I get the aluminum block in, I still got to plug these up. I think I might drill and tap. Since everything's apart, I'm going to drill and tap these and put some pipe plugs in there. But once that's in and running, I'm going to have to get this thing back up and running. I think I can do it. I'll show you guys the old crank. I'm not sure if you guys have seen that yet, but my mess of tools right here. This is the crank. You can feel these with your fingernail, but they measure about a half thou over minimum spec. So I'm gonna try and polish that up and reuse it if it's flat. So I just looked and I can't find that cam bearing. I might have just tossed it in the trash. But the cam bearing that caused the damage to that journal, I actually don't think it spun for very long. It might have been loose in there, I'm not sure, but there was zero signs of wear on the outside of that journal bearing. So I don't think that the block is actually damaged. I was thinking that that block was going to be scrapped, just because I don't think it's worth the price for me to go have those all oversized and put new bearings in when I can just pick up a block down the road. I mean, I got this aluminum block with a rotating assembly for 300 bucks. I could probably get one like that I just have to throw a hone in and some fresh bearings, probably for like 50 to 100 bucks. So, you know, spend anything more than $100 on a block isn't worth it to me. But I don't think we'll have to do that. I'll verify that. I'll get like a camera down in there and just make sure there's no scoring in there. And I'll probably end up slapping some fresh cam bearings in there, finding a crank, or actually just have that one ground back down, get some oversized bearings in there, or undersized, I guess. But yeah, so as you can see, everything's a mess. It's really bad, but we'll be working on that over the next week or so. So sorry I haven't been posting lately. A lot's been going on, and yeah, this whole thing going on right here really put a damper in things. But if you hang tight, we can zip over next door to my neighbor's house. I'm doing a little bit of work on his tractor, something very minor, where one of the blower motors isn't working. But I'm gonna run over there. So that wraps up the C4 Corvette for the weekend. We'll be hitting that back up throughout this week, working on it, and you guys will see some more videos being posted on the Corvette. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to receive notifications, and I'll see you next time.